One of the several ways that we're marking our historic bicentenary here at Virginia Theological Seminary is by creating vehicles that capture the complexity of our history. Hello, I'm Ian Markham, Dean and President of Virginia Theological Seminary. In this series of interviews, we explore the ways in which ministry has been shaped by the moment in which we're called to serve. While students are with us for a season, the strength of the seminary has been the staff who give literally years of their life to the institution to ensure its continuing vitality and effectiveness. In this video, 3 chief financial officers share their reflections on managing the administrative and financial aspects of the seminary.
I'm Heather Sedanzowitz, and former Vice President of Finance and Administration. I started at VTS in 1992 as the payroll administrator and worked my way across various jobs in the finance office. And then I left in 2017 to take a call at Austin Presbyterian Seminary.
I'm Jacqueline. I started at the seminary September 2017. I am the Vice President for Finance, Administration, and Operations, and the CFO now. It changes every year, the title, but this is what I'm currently doing. When I started in September 2017, I was the Vice President for Finance and Operations, and then when the Vice President of Administration retired, I took on the administration portion of her role.
So I'm Mary Louise Hicks. I began early in 1988, and I too have had numerous titles. When I began, I think I was controller and assistant business manager, and it progressed through the years till when I retired, I was the vice president for administration and finance. So I'll begin because I've come with a show and tell. What I have here is a manual ledger, which is the way that all of the books at Virginia Seminary were kept when I was hired. The auditors had said that they would no longer audit manual records. And so my job was to automate the business office. Now, I look back at that and laugh, but nonetheless, that was my job, to move from manual records to technology. At the time, the development office had a big Wang mainframe down in the basement of Bolin, and that was the only computer on campus. So that's where we come. So where's technology now?
We've moved past the ledger. Thank goodness.
Well, in the interim, the business office, we were all connected in our own local network so that we didn't have email, but our system was connected.
Yeah. So what system was it?
It was Blackbaud.
Okay.
Right. And somehow the wires, the server was in your office. It was in your desk.
Like I've forgotten that.
And it was just our floor and was all connected together.
Yeah. Well, now we have Blackbaud and we're on the cloud. So we moved from the database. We don't have the server room anymore because I think the server room was actually in Sparrow when I arrived, on the second floor of Sparrow. So we totally gone cloud-based. So every department now has access to Financial Edge and Blackbaud because we've actually pushed out through a distributed network to our major users like facilities. They input their own invoices and process their own AP, and academic affairs process their own. So all the heavy users do their own data entry. And in the finance and the business office, we're just still in those, small departments that we don't want to give access to because it's just more tedious because we're limited to the number of licenses that we can have on Blackbaud. So we've moved from the ledger, Mary. We have a automated distributed network now that is accessible really pretty much across the institution.
Does it take a lot of energy still to keep technology where on the cutting edge?
I think it takes more energy because we go through these constant updates, and with the updates, there's this need for training, and keeping the staff trained at a level in which they can be productive. Because when I arrived, we were actually moving from desktops to laptops. They were having a laptop. Everybody was going to get a laptop, and that was quite an interesting exercise that I walked into. Thank you. And with that, they also were adopting Microsoft Outlook. So now we had email, and there was training, and some people were trained, some people were not. And you know how it is. It was very difficult to get the faculty to come on board with the whole laptop and the email and the Microsoft Office. But I think we're there now. I think with 95% of the campus have laptops, and it was really helpful during the pandemic. Because we were actually able to work remotely a little easier because everybody had the equipment to do so. So we're trying to keep up with technology as best we can.
A lot of energy.
It's a lot of energy, but it's also a lot of exposure, with the whole data breaches. So we actually now have to buy, for the first time last year, we had to buy cyber insurance, which is actually quite expensive and very difficult to get. So it's increasing our costs in a number of areas that I had not, and I don't think the seminary had anticipated, because the cyber insurance is expensive, and if you have one breach, it just takes so much effort to just notify that you've had a breach and then to restore your databases. So it's a gift that keeps on giving.
I'm sure. For sure. So I guess we've all been through the technology thing, but we've also seen a lot of building on this campus. Gosh, shall I begin? Well, I'm sure I will forget some, but when I arrived, the academic building did not exist. Most of the classes were in Aspinwall. There was a big classroom there and everything. So while I was probably in the early 90s, the academic building was built. And now when I think about the fact that it's been redone, it's no longer a new building. Oh my goodness. And then after that, Aspinwall and Bolin were redone. And that connector between Bolin and Aspinwall was built where the elevator shaft is. That's the way they connected the buildings. Oh gosh, help me, Heather. Then, at some point we went to dormitories. We did the dormitories.
Shared bathrooms in the dormitories, and under your watch, individual, rooms were created with their own bathrooms and a laundry.
Were there still 4 dormitories?
1 or 2 to 3.
Well, no, because Price was the Con-Ed building.
Right. But then at some point, didn't it become a dorm as well? So the interesting thing was that when we redid the dorms, was at a time of declining enrollment. So the total number of dormitory rooms decreased because they were larger and they had their own baths. So that seemed great until the next year when there was a bumper crowd class of students and there weren't enough dorm rooms. So things ebb and flow. So we did the dorms, and then we did the guest houses. And all the time, faculty houses weren't air conditioned, so we were doing things like air conditioning faculty houses and trying to keep wet basements dry. That's probably still a challenge. And then we built the 2 semi-detached houses, the new faculty houses.
Oh, the duplex.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then...
and did you renovate Sparrow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Several times.
Right.
Because we'll talk about fires later. Yeah.
So also responsible for the chapel. What was that?
That was mine.
Yeah, but there was a fire in Sparrow at one point as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And so we sold some of the, we sold the land lease. There were two. There was the Aspen House, and there was also a Calvert apartment building. And we sold the one under Calvert. And that was $9 million. And with that, we redid the plant and installed all the piping, the 4-pipe piping through campus, because everything was on a 2-pipe system, which meant either you had air conditioning or you had heat. You never had both. And
it took a board decision to decide to move from one to the other. No, I'm kidding, but it was.
And that was a project that you would never be able to raise money for that time. So $9 million to do the heating and cooling. So that building and all the piping, and then the fire happened, and so we built the chapel, renovated the butterfly house, which had been a gymnasium. So we did that. Probably another renovation of Sparrow and the Welcome Center, because that had been the Con Ed building. That had been
CMT.
Center for Ministry of Teaching, right. And we made that into the Welcome Center. And that's when coffee, that was Dean Markham's mantra, was to, add coffee to the chapel class and lunch and coffee. And his expectation was you would go from chapel to get a cup of coffee, and there would be time to mingle and bring the community.
And how did the mail center land there? Was it always there?
No, I can't remember where the mail was. The mailbox.
The mail was.
Aspen.
So I'm going to move us backwards for just a moment. When I first started working here, the basement of Bolin was the student coffee lounge, and that's where everybody did go right after chapel to have coffee
And a cigarette.
I'm saying so. I was going to say, and several of the faculty members held court down there, and you could just see the smoke rise. Because when I arrived, people were still smoking at their desks. Staff were smoking. I mean,
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I digress. So the dean's idea of having coffee after chapel was not really new. It was just reinvented.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we did a little bit of renovation on the deanery and various houses. That's
Then you report?
how could you forget? I know, and I lived down there next to it. And my husband is in the construction business, and he was one of the biggest complainers about all the noise and the trucks going past our house at 6 a.m. That would rattle the windows. And thank you. And 1823.
You're going to tell us a little bit more about the apartment.
The apartments, in the master plan, the old master plan, there were several spaces around campus that had been identified as places to have a hub of family living. One being across the street, down
on Zabriskie.
On Zabriskie, right. And the architect felt it was that corridor on Trotter is that Trotter?
Mm-hmm.
Was the best place to locate. And so we went with a local architect on that. And it was at a time when any married student was living off campus. And we were using a lot of our scholarship money or financial aid money to subsidize their housing. And we determined that all that subsidy could be paying down a note to borrow and build those properties. And we could build enough at that time to house just about everybody. There would always be some students who wanted to live away from community. And I think now you probably have the situation where the community has grown so much that you can't house everybody.
Well, we try.
Perhaps, yeah.
So when I arrived, it was the second year of student housing because they moved in 2016. So when I got here in 2017, we had to learn now how to incorporate these families into the community. So we had to come up with rules for the children, certain areas they couldn't go to. So that was one of my biggest things I walked into. How do you manage down these families on campus, and with all the construction that started in 2019. So we took a break for a year. I don't think we had any construction in 2018. But we started the construction in 2019 with the renovation of Key Hall, which is now Bicentennial Hall, to house the Assyrian reliefs and the replica. And then we decided one building of renovation wasn't enough. Let's try to do two at the same time because they have some kind of economy of scale. So we decided to renovate the refectory and Addison at the same time. So the entering class of 2019 had to eat under a tent. And they had to have they had classes mostly in Aspinwall in the boardroom and any other vacant space that we could find. So that class, they just endured because I think the tent may have been worse. I'm not too sure. Every meal was under the tent, but it only lasted for a semester.
It's too bad you didn't wait a year for the pandemic.
We should have waited a year because the refectory was actually completed in December 2019. And so we went back into it in 2020 after, fall break. And they were only in there for 2 months. And then the pandemic happened. And then, of course, Addison completed and they couldn't go to class because all the classes were virtual. So the pandemic gave us an opportunity to finish those buildings without really having to displace students anymore. And then we decided to start on the library. So the renovation of the library was during the time of the pandemic, but we had to move the library, I think 20,000 volumes of books into the Welcome Center. So the Welcome Center became the library, which I think it was the library at one time before they had said. So the Welcome Center was there. We finished the library. COVID was still going on. And we decided we'd go right into the deanery. So we don't like to pause. We like to go from one thing to the next thing. And so the deanery just completed. And now we're going to start in the Welcome Center. So the Welcome Center will start the renovation on that this fall. So that's been my worldwide construction experience.
Well, it is amazing how everything keeps going round and round, because when I first arrived, there was a big conversation about married student housing. And there was consideration of buying some of the apartment buildings down at Quaker and such.
Have you heard this? They're across the street on Quaker, right there before Route 7.
Really? We were going to buy?
But there was conversation.
I think David Charlton really wanted to buy them.
Okay.
Now, nothing came of that. And then I would say at least twice while I was here, we had studies about whether to build married student housing. But we hadn't the foresight to figure out the financial piece of it that you would really save money with, or, well, at least the monies could be redirected to go.
And then I forgot, last year we did convert Maywood and what we're calling Bell House into student apartments. So Maywood now has 6 one-bedroom apartments, and Bell House, the house that Barney Hawkins used to live in, beside where you used to live. So it has 3 bedroom apartments. So we can actually...
I can't see that.
Yeah, you should go see it, Mary. It's actually quite beautiful. But so now we can actually accommodate 109 students and student families on the campus. And so that's probably about the maximum, because the dean wants to have 50 incoming students in every class for 150. So I guess it's kind of strange math, but we'll have about 110 on campus, and he's hoping for like 40 commuter students. But it ebbs and flows. So we have the 22 2-bedrooms, and then there are the 3 bedrooms and the 1 bedrooms. But you never know what the class mix is going to be. So the last 2 years, we've actually had more single students that require dorms than we've had families that require the apartment. So we're still trying to figure that out. It's quite a balancing act, because I think this year we're going to have about 12 vacant apartments, right? But no dorm. So we had to put some of the single students in the guest house, because we only have 59 dorm rooms, but we have, I think, 64 single students. So that's the thing with housing. I'm finding it's very tricky. It's hard to predict.
Yeah. So I've tried to think back about the things that sort of defined my time, or the things that I have the most memory about. And, we did a lot of building and so forth and so on, but it's the people and the events that really make it happen. When I came, Richard Reed was dean, and then Martha Horn became dean, and then I worked just very briefly after Ian came. So I went through a variety of leadership, but I think about, now it was such a non-event, but at the time, Y2K was the big fear that went in. That was going to be the end of the world.
It's going to shut down, yeah.
The end of the world, for sure. And then 9/11 happened, and I think that was probably the major defining moment while I was here. You faced yours, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'll start off with when I started. So Mary hired me to do payroll, as I said.
May I interrupt? So we needed a new payroll person, and I interviewed Heather, and she was perfect. And the reason that I knew she was perfect was because she said that she couldn't come for like 3 months because she had to finish the year and close the books and do the tax reporting at her current employer. Well, this was the type of person that I wanted to come, So I waited patiently for Heather to come.
And then on the first day of the job, at the end of the day, I had to inform her that I was pregnant.
That was okay. I was good.
Of course, the most defining moment was the chapel fire, and it just so happens I was on the chapel team, and that was heartbreaking, and then we had to move into Scott Lounge, served as the chapel for a semester longer than a semester, while we renovated the basement of Addison to be the chapel. And we called Duncan Blair and said, well, how long is it going to take us to, tear the old chapel down, build a new chapel? And he said, at least 5 years. To which Dean Markham said, how can that be? If it's not going to take that long?
And that was unacceptable response.
He didn't know Alexandria very well, yes. Sorry.
And it was spot on, the 5 years. And
it did take 5?
Oh, yes. It took more than a year to get permission and design to tear down the burned out structure. So that was defining. And the housing collapse, and we can talk about finances too, but that was another defining moment because we had to reduce the personnel budget by $1 million, and that meant 15 people. So we invited people to early retire. We encouraged, we had some incentive for people to depart on their own, but in the end we had to let go 6 or 7 people once all those retirements fell into place. And that was, I felt very good about the method and the way we did it. people were well informed that there was going to be this reduction. I don't think to those people who were affected, it was a surprise, but it wasn't. They knew it was coming, and we dealt. I think we gave everybody a very fair package, but it was. I didn't sleep for days going into that.
Yeah, those things are. I think the defining moment since I've been here has certainly been the pandemic. The pandemic has, just changed the way the community was forced to behave. Because we were people that were always out. Chapel, lunch, class, and to have to go to a virtual environment to pivot so quickly. Where all the classes had to be taught virtually, and for us to even learn how to do that, because we didn't necessarily have faculty and staff that were, really investing on being cutting edge of technology. And then just the isolation and the fear that was really on campus, because one of the first cases actually happened here, and we just didn't know how to do that. And I felt for the first 9 months we were just in crisis management mode every day. Zoom calls every day, because the rules changed every hour, it seemed, And so that has been a defining, I think, moment for me since being here. But now that it's kind of calming down and we can go back to construction. And I think now the GTS conversations that we're going to be having and where that affiliation goes may be another defining choice. We'll see how that turns out.
Well, several thoughts. I began in 1988, and of course there had just been the downturn right before that, and so once again everything ebbs and flows, and we never had what you experienced, but there were times when the endowment dropped precipitously, and then it built back up. So yeah, the economy certainly influences what we do. I think when I came, help me, Heather, was the annual budget maybe 7 million, 8 million?
That sounds probably right.
And I think the endowment was 30 million when I changed. So where are you now? Well, this today.
The annual budget this year is 20 million. We had gotten it down to 18, but somehow it just bounces back. And the endowment is actually over 200 million, but that was a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, today, who knows where it will be, but it had its strongest performance last year. It closed at the end of the year 205. So we were very pleased with that. So it has really, not only through, the investments, but through contributions to the endowment. Because during the capital campaign, had, I think, 5 million that was added to the endowment. One for an endowed chair, and one for an endowment for the St. Nicholas display. So we've been adding to the endowment, which has been really, really good.
It ensures the future.
That is the future.
What will make the future happen?
And in that, the way we've invested has changed a lot.
Yes.
Without question, because when I was working for you, we were investing cash into T-bills that we were constantly rolling over, and stocks and bonds. And then you, I think, led the charge to kind of into alternatives. The investment committee.
I was going to say, I wasn't driving the bus, but I was a part of that. Yeah. There was our short-term operating cash was all in T-bills, which actually made good sense at the time. And we bought and sold them all the time just to keep the operating cash going. But the endowments were in a pretty normal 60-40 type of investment. But Larry Redway was the treasurer and an investment person himself, and he really guided the investments for many years in a very, very fortuitous way. And then he retired, and a new person came on the board as the investment person. And that's when we went into hedge funds, I think. And that was a big new step for us. And so I bet now you're probably in all sorts of alternatives.
All alternatives. And we have to thank Elizabeth Keppel Jennings, our investment chair. She has really been leading the charge. She's an extraordinary woman, and really, has her hand on the pulse of the market. And we work with, of course, months.
Are you still with
We're still with Eric.
How is that, Tristan? Well,
and he's taken us to places, but they've all been good. He's very thoughtful, and he knows higher education, and he actually knows, he has a lot of, relationships with the Episcopal schools and the church schools and us. And so he's really helped with Elizabeth's guidance, really helped us grow that portfolio and get into markets. But we're very, always conscious of the things we invest in. So we want to make sure that we're ethically investing. So we have to make sure we remind them of those things. But I'm sure the portfolio has changed a lot since you've seen it, because we have our investment committee meetings, and most of the time we're kind of Ian and I are sitting there like, okay, we're just okay. Do you need for us to make a decision? Because we're not sure.
When I first came, the big conversation was divesting of investments in South Africa. So it makes you so back. And I'm embarrassed to say this, but I will tell a story on myself. When I first arrived and went to my first investment committee meeting, I was very intimidated from the get-go. And then they started talking about basis points. And all of a sudden I went blank, and I thought, I have no idea what a basis point is. I recovered at some point.
It's one of David Charlton's favorite things.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I went completely blank.
Oh, well, I'll tell an embarrassing story on myself. Is you sent me to the ATS CFO conference. You were close to retirement, and so it was the first time I'd been there, and Olivine was doing all the investment accounting. I was doing, the other side of stuff. And so when I was introducing myself at the ATS, I would say I was from VTS, and people were like, and just going on and on about our endowment. And I had no idea the value of our endowment. And that's embarrassing. And I had to call Mary, and I said, why are they treating me like this? She said, well, we have a very big endowment.
When it comes to the ATS schools, we may be leading. But my funny story is, when I came here, I told Ian, he showed me the financial statements. I said, oh, you're the Harvard of Theological Education.
Yeah. Our per student endowment was actually greater than Harvard.
Yes.
One day. Yeah. Well,
So he loves that. He loves to know that story.
the other thing that I think back on is how the management of the finances has changed just so much. The capstone project I did when I was working on my MBA, in my MBA program, was on capital debt financing. And so I came thinking that I knew all of this about debt financing, to learn that Virginia Seminary had never done any debt financing in its existence. And in fact, the monies for the academic building were all in hand. It was, the money, it had come from bequests. And I think there was a capital campaign that raised some more. But it was cash on the barrel for that building and for just about everything else that we did. we built those new faculty houses by selling the 2 houses down the street on Seminary, where you probably don't know that.
That big farm, the white farmhouse.
They used to be.
Yes, and there was another house on the same property, which has been torn down now. But
Okay. Yeah. So, we helped. Well, the house did not look like that on the inside. It was about to fall down. But so nonetheless, so now, how have you financed all of this? I mean, I know there's been a capital campaign, but there's been finance.
There's been a capital campaign and there's the financing, and we really took advantage of the market last year and consolidated the outstanding loan for the student housing with the new loan that we took out, waiting as requests come in from the capital campaign. So we have probably one of the lowest interest rates I've ever heard of. So it's almost embarrassing to repeat. It's like 1.2%.
Wow. And so was your financing bonds or bank financing?
For bank finance.
It's bank financing. Okay.
And what we did, we actually went out and used a consultant, and she shopped it around for us. So I didn't have to do that heavy lifting. And so she got bids in from 3 competing banks, and we end up going.
Is this the same consultant in Richmond?
Probably. She's phenomenal. And she got us this deal that we couldn't refuse. And the first 2 years is interest only.
Yeah.
And so
We're usually trying to
and we're hoping to be able to repay that loan in less than 10 years, because as the requests come in, we will use those funds to pay down the loan. And we probably won't need all of the proceeds, because some of the construction projects, particularly Addison and the refectory, came in well under budget. So
That never happens.
that's been fortunate for me, Mary. All of the construction renovation projects have come in at or below budget. So that will be a real life savings for us. So the intent, and I hope the board will approve us to just go ahead and repay those use those unused funds to just pay down that loan. So, because one thing as a CFO, I hope we all share, you never want to leave debt to anyone else. So that's one of my things. I was like, during my tenure here, I want to make sure that whatever debt was incurred under my watch is repaid under my watch, because I think it's just, Heather didn't leave me a mess, so I don't want to leave anybody. I don't want to leave anybody else a mess. So I'm hoping that it won't take us very long to pay that down, because the capital campaign has exceeded our expectations. As Mary, you're on that committee. What, 60 million now?
They keep raising the threshold. Yes, because the money's there. It's remarkable. It is remarkable, and again, it's what makes the future with a bright outlook for sure. But so you were saying the other night, it's what you had been thinking about.
I was thinking, for more levity in our conversation, of funny moments or funny stories or things outside of bookkeeping and stuff like that. Was there anything any story that you could tell? And just as we were talking now, I remembered when Pokemon Go first came out, we would see people all over campus, with their phones out, apparently catching Pokemon here on campus. That was a very fun time.
When I came, they were doing that, and I didn't understand it because I didn't know. I was like, yeah, I didn't catch that.
Yeah. And the other story I was telling Mary was that if you go up the Aspinwall Tower, not all the way to the top, but that first stairwell that you have to go through a door, and then you're above the 3rd floor. There's a secret room in the back of the building, and you go in that room, and there's a poster of Charlie Chaplin, and it was there the entire time I worked here. A poster of Charlie Chaplin, this small table with candles in a wine bottle, and a chair.
Oh,
And
And think about candles being lit in that tower.
That tower.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, yeah. That
Let's have to go nail the others. They're still there. God answered.
Well, the other really memorable place on campus is in the basement of Sparrow, which we spent a lot of time down there because that's where all the old financial records were kept. And, once a year we had to go down there. Anyway, a former employee who had been on the maintenance crew had more lucrative employment by running the numbers. And there was a telephone down there where the calls would come in and he would take the bets and obviously this was not known at the time, but there are numbers written all over the wall. It is quite remarkable. I wonder, is it still there? Has it ever?
It was still there when I left.
Yeah.
They're in pencil and they run all up and down the door jamb.
In the basement sphere.
And they also existed in the boiler house because he also had a phone down there. And so he would take them down there too.
Feeling I've been cheated.
I don't
have any stories like that. Maybe I haven't been here long enough.
So
That's a good one.
I'm a parent of 3 children, and one of my things that I told myself every day, you're not the mother of the world. So I tried very hard to not take the baseball caps off the students and that sort of thing. Really worked on that. But one day, a young staff person who I was very fond of, he came in and we had a talk, and he got up and I left, and I said, "Thank you, honey." And I just was so embarrassed that I had called him honey, which is why I would, call my children. And then I thought, how unprofessional that I had called him that.
Well, Bishop Lee Peter Lee was the chair of the board, and he just recently passed away. And everybody called him Bishop Lee. There, no question, that's what you called him. And about the time he was gonna roll, I think it was his last meeting, and I got all my stacks of papers and rushing to the elevator to go up to the board meeting, and he was getting in the same elevator. He said, "Good morning." I said, "Good morning, Peter." And he said, "That's okay, I go by Peter also."
Yeah. I never called the dean except Dean. I never called her Martha.
Oh, you didn't?
Not at the time. I think I always called her Dean. Well, maybe I did if we were one-on-one. It was, yeah.
So did you call Ian D?
In meetings, yes.
Really? Well, that has changed. I'm calling me.
Right. Well, it speaks to our times, too. Everything is much less one. Well, there certainly were times, funny times. There were very sad times, too. Deaths, and just like anywhere, there's a constant change and such. So
has the staff really grown since your time? What was the staff size?
I suspect that it has, although I don't really know. We were lean in the business office. We had 3 people, well, 4, I guess, if you do, with financial aid person. And
also financial aid used to sit in finance office.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the maintenance staff were all our employees. Is that true?
That's still true.
That's still true. And then, of course, we had the Butterfly House. Contracts were the food service.
Mm-hmm.
When I first came, we had our own bookstore.
Cokesbury.
Oh, Noble Fell Cokesbury. We managed it.
Oh, you... I was from Cokesbury because I used to come over here when I lived in Charlotte to go to.
Right. Well, the bookstore was down below Aspinwall in this funny little building and hadn't made a profit for ever so many years. So, it didn't even break even. And so we stopped that, and that's when Cokesbury came. So,
Yeah, when Addison was built, that's when.
right.
Because it was at the lower level where the Flamingo is now. Okay.
So contract services were the bookstore, the food service.
And we outsourced the IT
Right.
for a while,
Right.
because it was just us.
And then you bought it back in?
Then the first time it was ever in was
Early 90s. I know I had a consultant who,
you
Again.
hired Chris Cunningham as our in-house
right,
director.
I think he was the first one in. Before that, I actually had figured out the 4 computers for the business office and how to network that and gotten Blackboard. So I had gotten us started.
So you were the IT person.
I can't figure out how to work my Apple Watch. So anyway, and then I had a consultant who was actually very, very helpful. And then that led to the first IT director. But that was a one-person show for a good while.
Yeah.
And then when
it kept going back and forth.
As they outsourced, we outsourced the contract services, our IT, food services, housekeeping, but we still have some internal housekeeping.
Yeah, then we
But the majority of it is outsourced. And grounds now, we outsource grounds.
Yeah.
Well, because we just couldn't keep up with grounds with the staff. It just became so difficult to hire staff. That work is seasonal. So then you hired the full-time staff, but what do you do with them in the off-season? So, and it just became really difficult to find people that were interested in that work. So we decided 4 years ago to outsource grounds.
and the grounds look beautiful. They're just lovely. Now, I will also say that old habits die hard. And I lived right below the chapel in that house down there and had a dog. And so 30.
Okay.
Yeah. Had a dog. So I walked the grounds a lot and then would walk in the morning and send an email that, these lights are out. This and this tree needs a little work. Well, as I'm driving on campus today, there's 2 very dead trees. Old habits do die hard.
Thank you, Mary. Just let us know. You're like the dean. He does that too, because now that he has the dog, he walks in almost every week. There's an email of things that he's noticed on the campus. And I was like, somebody else has to walk the dog. This is way too much information. But the grounds, I think it's one of the things that I love the most about this place. And during the pandemic, we were just so pleased that people from the community would come, and more people came to walk and bring their children and play in Trotter Bowl and play on the side of, I guess, I don't know what do we call that area by the cemetery, that big open area? Does it have a name?
Where they slid?
Yeah, where they slid.
So the cemetery makes me think of another story when several really bad storms have done a lot of damage on this campus. And one of them took down the gate of the cemetery and a bunch of the fencing around it. So it didn't actually do much damage to the tombstones, as I recall, but the gate, which is very intricate, and so we had a lot of conversation about what to do about that. Obviously, we needed to have it redone, but in the process, we moved the borders of the cemetery so that it was larger. We were fairly quiet about that expansion of the cemetery.
I thought you were going to tell the story about the facilities person that fell into the grave that they were digging. Was that your one, Heather?
I mean, I know the story. Well,
I wonder if it was my son, because my son worked for the buildings and grounds crew for several summers.
No, this person is still here.
Oh, is it? All right. Well, my son says, he has on his resume that he's not growing.
And fallen in the...
It never fall in the,
This person was digging the grave and fell in it. Yes, yeah. But you're going to tell that.
No.
But whatever that area is, a lot of people would come and, what do we call that on that side of the campus? They would come and bring their picnic baskets and blankets. And because of the house I live in, 29, I could see them out of my sunroom window. I was like, this is so lovely that the community finds this place a safe place to come. So we had a lot more foot traffic, a lot more neighborhood traffic during the pandemic, which was good, because when I arrived in 2017, we were having the bike lane discussion about putting a bike lane on Seminary Road, and the community wasn't necessarily happy about that. But I think they like it now. What do you think?
I'm agnostic about the bike lane.
I like it. I mean, because you feel safer walking on the sidewalk, actually, because there's a bike lane in between you and the traffic. So as you walk the side, because a lot of people do walk and run on the sidewalk, and I know I personally feel safer. And I find it safer crossing the street to the 5 houses that are across the street.
And do we still own that land beyond, below those houses?
Yes. And I think we're, trying to figure out what to do with that. Because what is it, 9 acres, I think, over there.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Because
I can remember walking that property with your husband, Don, to try to get it surveyed and all.
So, yeah, my husband's a surveyor, land surveyor, and the company that he used to work for, Holland Engineering, they'd been doing surveys here since the 1950s. So he actually he worked on Addison before I ever started here.
Oh, wow.
And then, kept using that company. But there came a time where I had to say, look, I need to disclose, or you need everybody to be aware. It's the architect who's picking the survey. But just so you know, my husband is high up in Bowman, so you got to take that into consideration. And I think for this building, they moved on to a different. No, it was right after this building. They moved to a different civil engineering.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Lots of fond memories.
Do you miss?
It's funny because I live not too far away, and I still come over and walk quite a bit with my current dog. So I come to campus. I consider myself just about the most fortunate person in the world to have had the life experiences I've had and to have had the time at Virginia Seminary. It also became crystal clear to me that it was time to retire. And I was...
Yeah, after how many years?
Almost 20.
Okay.
And it just was crystal clear. And I have not regretted it. I haven't... I maintain a fondness, but I've never, looked back. And I feel that, to have a retirement, I'm pretty active and have done a lot of nonprofit board work, and it's just been just right, post right, Yeah. So,
Okay.
So Mrs. I enjoy reading the commentary. The commentary, I do. I used to do it daily. I'm not a daily commentary reader anymore, but I do check in and see the posts on the Facebook link and other things. And people at my institution also see that and will say, did you see what Virginia Seminary is doing now? And it's always with great admiration. And I say, yes. I had been here just under 25 years and have lived in the DC area my entire life. So is my whole family. So it was our big adventure to move. And I love the East Coast. I love coming to visit. But it's also, I'm glad we took that step to do something else just for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I love it here. It's I tell people I've lived a lot of places along the East Coast, but I tell people this is probably the best place I've ever worked, and it's because of the people. It's good to work in an environment where you share common value with people, and I love being in an environment where you can talk about your faith and people don't look at you like you have two heads. Which I found in some places, because most of my career was spent in private industry, and you just didn't talk about politics and religion. You just didn't. So I find that this environment allows me to be more of my authentic self. So it's just really been just a sweet, sweet place to be, with real business challenges. I was a little surprised that a place of this size had so much going on. I was like, how could it be so busy? I mean, it's a small place, relative to the places that I had been. But you have all the challenges of a big institution. You just don't need the same scale, but every function is needed. So it's been really good for me. I have really enjoyed my time here.
From our perspective, it is so clear what financial stability, what it allows, between good leadership and financial stability. It's just amazing what could happen. And that's what is going on now at Virginia Seminary. Yeah. But to work with the financial stability is huge.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Yep, for sure.
From the student standpoint, I'm sometimes amazed when an alumni shows up, and I have to think to myself, did they graduate? Did they graduate last year or?
Yeah, it all fades together. And not how long ago it was.
And also connecting with alumni outside of the seminary, either Facebook or visiting churches. They're so lovely, and glad to see you. I have the perspective of being at a seminary where our students are housed there, but no employees. And the sense of community that is missing it is profound when I look at what VTS has, and that interaction with faculty and students on a Saturday morning in Trotter, various other opportunities. That's a real, it can be sometimes having your colleague as your next door neighbor, or having to find a master key for a student who has been locked out of their apartment
Many times.
In winter, and the person has no shoes on. That can be burdensome, but it's also quite a gift.
But this is my first time living in a community like this, and I didn't realize what I was taking on. So I remember, I do have a funny story. The first time I took my trash out, I wasn't completely, properly dressed. And I'm taking my trash out, and here comes students across my yard, and I was like, oh no. And I was like, oh, Jack, you can't go out with your pajamas on anymore. So now I know that every time I leave my door, I have to be fully dressed, because there could be a student or, a neighbor, faculty, colleague that's, coming across my yard. So that was a big gift and a big surprise. I didn't realize that that was going to be the case. But I've enjoyed living in community. I enjoy being able to just, if there's an event, you don't have to get in traffic. You can just come up to the chapel with, no traffic, and getting to know the students, because they're here all the time. And I think 1823 has been a real gift. And the Flamingo, I think, has now become the center of the campus, the center of the campus social activity. So the students and the faculty and the staff kind of gather now in the Flamingo. And I think that's helping to build, because I was a little concerned with the student and staff, relationships, because that seemed to be one that wasn't necessarily solidified, because the students don't necessarily interact with the staff, because you're like a business office. They only come by when, there's a problem. And now that you can pay your bills online, we don't really see the students like we used to, because when I first arrived, they would come by to, check on their bills and we would get to know them. But now that they can pay their bills online and get all their questions answered online, we don't have the same amount of student traffic and ask. But there are other opportunities, for us to get to know the students. And I certainly hope that will continue, because I enjoy the students. I enjoy getting to know them.
Gosh, I think I have such fond memories as being treated as a colleague by the faculty. And it was a privilege and an honor to be able to, sit in faculty meetings and, be treated as an equal. So I'm very, very grateful about that. Students, I feel like I saw a lot of students. I had a small group, so I was an advisor. And so we sat in my living room and once a week and had wonderful dialogue. So I really felt like I got to know some students, not all students, but some students. And then I guess one of my fondest memories is teaching the money ministry and management class. That when I got faculty status, Dean Reed said to me, "I would like for you to think about teaching that class." And it was hard work for me. I'm not a natural teacher, and I really had to work at it. But having that interaction with the students and trying to help them to think about the fact that being ordained is more than preaching a Sunday sermon, that it's really being, wearing a lot of different hats. And I know Heather continued that, and it was very rewarding, very rewarding.
How did you balance that? Because I'm going to teach the church and nonprofit administration course in the spring. I'm a little anxious about it. So how did you balance your time?
Not well. Now, it was really hard because, you have it's not a 9-to-5 job, it's 8-to-6 job. And at the time I taught, I was teaching at the beginning a 3-hour segment at night, which I sort of stopped being coherent after 9 anyway. So all of my prep was done out of the work hours in time frame. So it was a challenge. It was a real challenge.
I agree. And after teaching it so many times, when I relied more on my knowledge, inherent knowledge, rather than trying to put together information from resources, when I just relied on what I knew and what I was comfortable with, that made a big difference.
Okay.
I mean, it.
And that was some advice somebody gave me, because I was developing it this semester. And I was like, why am I struggling so? Because I have 30 books on my table. I'm like, where is this such a struggle? And they was like, Jackie, just tell them what you know. You've been doing this for 30 years. Just tell them what you know. And then when I relaxed and started to, kind of put down the stuff I know, it just became easy. But I was like, what's going to happen when you have to teach it? I was like, where are you going to find the time? I mean, because this job kind of never sleeps. And I guess it'll happen. I'm not sure. But I did teach one of the sessions where you said 3 hours. I thought about it. I was at night from 6 to 9:30.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got home and I laid down and my back just started spasming because I had stood up for the entire 3 hours. And I was like, oh, that was a mistake. And I was like, you should have sat down. And I was like, oh, yeah. And I was like you, Mary. I was like, 9:30, I'm asleep.
Yeah.
So,
No.
so wish me well with that. Because I was like, I don't know how you balance these two things, but
Yeah, I can remember there was a computer room in Addison. That was one of the first technology things we had because students didn't have their own computers, so there was shared computers in there. And I can remember doing a session in there trying to teach them about church software. And it was just a disaster. It was just a disaster. So that went off of the curriculum pretty quickly. So, beauty.
now, what do you think are the main things that clergy need to know and when it comes to finance and managing and affairs?
I think how to read a financial statement.
Absolutely.
Whether that's the statement of activities or the statement of financial position. I myself prefer the statement of activities, and I tell them why. And I actually, because I served as treasurer at my church, would kind of sanitize my church financial record, is to show them, to point out, oh, well, you see on this line what I interpret that to say, so that they aren't just looking at columns of numbers, but how can you...
What is the story that it tells? What is the narrative? Yeah.
And personnel management is huge, how to hire, inspire, and such. And I often would have people come in. At one point, 2 faculty members and I team taught. And so they would do the theology of stewardship and those sorts of things. So it's just to broaden the perspective.
To get them thinking.
And, I used to think that often students came with these really interesting careers and a lot of expertise, but somehow they let go of all of that and they went to seminary and didn't see how that was going to relate with what they were doing in ministry. So to just kind of bring it all together.
I think the demographic of the student is changing too, because I think last year and this year, we have the median age is getting younger and younger. So I think we're attracting students now that don't have a lot of real world experiences outside of education.
Yeah.
And some of them haven't even seen a financial statement. They don't even know that need. So I may have my work cut out for me. So
or even how to run a meeting. I have known a few students who have graduated and then become the priest in charge, having never been in a organized meeting.
I'm not going to be able to cover all these things, but maybe just a few.
Yeah. In thinking about faculty, there's just always the hiring of new faculty. There's a retirement of faculty, and how is it ever going to be without so-and-so teaching such and such, and then a wonderful new faculty person comes and life goes on. There were certainly some sad times. A fairly newly hired faculty member died, and so there's been sad, hard times around that. But when you're living in community with them, you feel all of that so poignantly.
And I think it's hard to retire. I think for some of the faculty members, I think it's hard to decide.
This has been their life.
Because I was thinking about it myself one day. I was like, well, it's almost unfair, that you have to retire and leave a community that you may have spent 30 years in. And then at that age, now you have to go off and try to build a community somewhere else. And I was like, I understand the retirement, but I was like, it might, there are two sides to that. If you've lived in a place pretty much all of your adult life, and then you have to go out and make new friends at some new location.
Well, it's a wonderful environment here, and it's a very protected environment.
Yes.
So to go forth and do something new is very difficult for many. I'm thinking about the faculty houses where the faculty person had never allowed their study to be painted because of all of their books and everything, and, and to yeah.
We know what you're saying.
No.
So, Mary, you made an observation to me many years ago, and it was around somebody's retirement. Somebody had announced their retirement, and then were acting out in very odd ways. And I said something to Mary, and she said, "This is not unusual for unknown anger to bubble up, and they don't even know that it's coming about." And that was the best observation, because now I see it, and I can see it and recognize it for what it is.
When I was the person that was facilitating the move out of the house and, talking to them about their retirement benefits and, helping them get enrolled in Medicare, all of these sorts of things. And that's right. Very often, anger, frustration, fear is the underlying. And so that would happen. And then I learned that I could almost calendar when it was all going to change. 6 months to a year after retirement, I would have some lovely note from them, or something would happen that it was, it was past. Yeah, exactly. So it's.
So, Mary, what are you looking forward to next year during the whole celebration, the celebratory year?
Well, I feel like it's already started.
It has already started.
Yeah, and more. Well, I guess when I read about the possibilities with General, I read about this new Lilly. It's not Lilly, Trinity Granger
event, for cats,
$750,000. There's just, the possibilities are just remarkable. And when I began, there were 11 Episcopal seminaries.
Mm-hmm.
We all knew that was probably too many, and conversations about consolidations and all didn't go well. And
even when you thought it was too many.
Yeah. Exactly. And there were some really serious conversations that would just fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that enough people with vision to see the future realize that consolidation is a good thing.
Yeah. So, Heather, you'll be coming back for some of our celebrations?
I hope so.
I know so. I think that's the thing I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to students and staff that will return to some of these activities these big activities that we're planning. Because I think it's found to be a really, 200 years old institution to remain solid. And grow. It's growing, and that's a good sign that we must be doing something right.
No, without question. And what an honor in some small way to have been a part of it.